Okay, we're going to talk right now about pre-World War II China, but we're going to go back in time a little bit to 1900. So remember, last time we talked about China, we were looking at them just being humiliated by the foreigners. And so China, we talked a little bit about self-strengthening, but China is also trying to adapt to the 20th century. So they have this phrase, Tiyang, which is, bringing in what is good about from the West, but not doing so much that it changes what it means to be Chinese. So we'll contrast that with the Japanese, right, who go all the way this, right, and maybe forgot for a while what it means to be Japanese. But the Chinese are going to try to blend both. So, as they do this, part of it is that they overthrow the Qing dynasty and in 1911. And so by 1912, they're ready to declare the Republic of China. And the people who overthrow the Qing are part of the Kuomintang, or the Nationalist Party. And they're led by this man, Sun Yat-sen, or as I used to know him, Sun Yat-sen. So if I accidentally say that, I'm talking about the same guy. So he's the leader of the Nationalist Party, and they overthrow the Qing dynasty, and Sun believes in establishing a democracy, a democratic republic. But as you can imagine, going from thousands of years of imperial rule to democracy is going to take some time. And so he has these goals of slowly introducing democratic reform. Before he can really take off, China undergoes a civil war. And from this civil war on, almost until probably the beginning of World War II, we call this the warlord period. So as you can see by this picture, China just fragments, and part of this is the legacy of the spheres of influence, right? Where each region of China signed their own trade agreement with a Western power. So in this case, all these colors represent different warlords. And for example, let's say there's a bunch of warlords here in this peach color, and they all agree to kind of join up here. But they would also then sign their own agreement with whatever Western power. So this is sort of the state of things, a fragmented China. There is technically a central government, but they don't hold much power. So, as you notice by the date there, 1916, World War I is now raging, and China, as you follow along in your notes there, joins with the Allies. And like people in India and people in Africa, when they join with the Allies, they expect economic freedom after the war. They expect to be the masters of their own destiny, and that the Westerners will leave them alone. But I'm sure you know how that works out for them. Like Italy and Germany and India and various people in Africa, China is going to get dissed at the Paris Peace Conference. And so that leads to a lot of anger. So remember, if you're not British or the French, you're probably unhappy with what happened at the end of World War I. So this is a big deal for China, and it's called the May 4th movement. So you see the date there, 1919. So it's clear to the Chinese that they are not going to get what they wanted out of the West. And so this is important for both the Kuomintang, or the nationalists, but it's also important for the communists. So what happens here on May 4th, 1919, thousands of Chinese people come to Tiananmen Square and to protest. They're angry over the Paris Peace Conference, but they also want reform. And what's amazing about this, you got shopkeepers to students, everybody, all walks of life. So Sun Yat-sen is happy because it means that the Chinese people want reform and are interested in that. For a long time, they thought maybe the basic populace didn't care. So it's important for the communists because some of the young intellectuals find inspiration in communism. Remember this guy? That is Vladimir Lenin. He has sent missionaries to China for a long time, but it's the anger over World War I that sparks them to seek answers in communism. So in 1921, the first communist meeting is held in this very building in Shanghai. And you're wondering, wow, that's a great picture. Who would take such an awesome picture? That's right, it's me. Your crazy history teacher, and who takes nerdy pictures like this when in China. So this is the very building where they met, and the young Mao, there he is present at the founding of the party. And your notes say Mao Zedong and his idea of communism. So for the most part, he is a Marxist, right? And he has these ideals. But what separates him from our Russian friends is that he is going to start with the peasants. Since the bulk of the population of China are peasants, he feels that they need to buy into this revolution. Remember, the Bolsheviks and Lenin and Trotsky don't care, right, if people are on board. They're going to make it happen whether people like it or not. So, in this time of frustration, right, we'll ask ourselves, can the communists and the nationalists be friends? Sometimes. If Sun is in charge, yes, they can be friends, right? He's angry over Western treatment, and so he reaches out to the Communist Party. And so they work together under Sun's leadership to fight the warlords. And this is all good times until Sun dies in 1925, and this man, Jiang Jieshi, takes over. Now, your textbook calls him Jiang Jieshi, the SOLs will call him that, but up until recently, he was also known as Chiang Kai-shek. So you might see that name is the same guy. So when he takes over, he's not going to be too friendly with the communists, which we will see happen in 1927 with the Shanghai Massacre. There he is, Jiang Jieshi. He rounds up thousands of communists in Shanghai, and they're executed or even beaten and shot in the streets. And so this is a pivotal moment for the communists in China. You know, how are they going to survive this onslaught? And in 1928, Jiang becomes president of China. So if you're following along here, so 1927, massacre of communists, and then in 1928, Jiang becomes the president. The United States and the Great Britain are like, hooray, Jiang, we support you. But Soviet Union's like, no, we do not. We know what you did to our people. So from this point on, the communists and the nationalists are not really gonna be friends. So they're facing extinction, so Mao, as the leader, literally heads to the hills. And I'm going to pretend these are the actual hills he heads to, but he hides up in the mountains and hills of south central China. He forms the Red Army. Your book calls it the Red Army. It's actually the People's Liberation Army. And today the Army of China is known as the PLA. So just be prepared for both terms. He begins to use guerrilla tactics against the Kuomintang, or the Nationalist Party, KMT. So they would, hide out in these hills, sneak down, hassle the Kuomintang or the Nationalists, and then sneak back up into the hills. So this goes on for quite some time, and eventually Jiang Jieshi is ticked off. So he's going to try to get rid of the communists once and for all. So you'll see there in 1933, Jiang's army of 700,000 surround Mao and his army of 100,000 in these hills. So let's say they're down here, right? So he decides they gotta get out of Dodge and they gotta do it quickly. So they go on what is now known as the Long March. So here's a map that shows they're gonna march 6,000 miles to reach these caves in northwest China. So look at the stats there. 100,000 people began this march. Only 8,000, let's say, survive. So it's under ruling conditions, and they are barely out of the reach of the nationalist forces. So why is this important? It's considered the defining moment for Chinese communists. Mao, Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping, people who are going to control China until the 1980s, all were on the Long March. So how did you have street cred in the Communist Party? You said you were on the Long March. And it's important because the communists survive and live to fight another day. So just to finish out the notes there, I don't have any pretty pictures, but as you recall, World War II has begun, or at least Japanese aggression has begun at the same time in the 30s. So by 1938, the Japanese control most of China. Remember, in 37 they take over Nanjing, and Nanjing is the capital that Jiang Jiechi has moved the capital from Beijing to Nanjing. So they've sacked that city, so they're controlling much of China. So from 1942 to 1945, Mao has solidified his position up here in the north, and he improves the lives of peasants, and he wins their loyalty. Jiang Jiechi has also made some promises to the peasants, but has not kept them, so people start to come over to Mao's side. However, we're aware of these problems, so the nationalists, they raise 2.5 million member army to fight the Japanese, and they get $1 billion in aid from, guess? Did you guess the United States? Then you are correct. Because we're obviously going to help them fight the Japanese rather than sending money to the communists. So theoretically, they're supposed to work together to fight the Japanese, but Jiang Jiechi and the nationalists think the communists are in fact the greater threat, so they're going to save a lot of that money. It's not going to go and help people, but they're going to save it because they know the fight with the communists are coming. And we will talk about that next.